Welcome to the Double Shot with your favourite cousins, or I should say your favourite cousin and the stand-in. Mitch, you had a whole run sheet ready last week. Alex decided to pull the rug from underneath you, but you're in this week. Welcome.
Yeah, she managed to weasel her way in for one last hurrah before she shot off to Fiji, but I'm back for a couple of weeks, I believe, James.
You are indeed, and just quietly, I don't think we were missing out on much by not having you here last Tuesday after the effort that you put in at Alex's wedding.
I was present in the office and very thankful I didn't have to attend the recording there because I was barely able to log into my computer, let alone do a podcast.
There's comparisons going around of Meatloaf in the 2018 Grand Final, an appearance fee only from you on the first half of last week.
The soles of my shoes had holes in them after all that Jewish dancing.
Well, yes, our girl is in Fiji on honeymoon, a well-deserved break. So it is good to have you here. And I'll tell you what, might I say, it is the best time of the year for sport, just because you've got the footy finals and all that sort of thing. And then we get treated to King Kyrgios coming out and smoking the number one seed in the US Open this morning. How good is he going in terms of his run of form lately?
Mate, he's going fantastic and was very graceful in his victory. And I must say, though, doesn't the media love to jump ship when our man Kyrgios is winning? Like, if he's not winning, he's a peanut, he's carrying on. When he's winning, oh, geez, they love him. So, good to see an Australian doing well, though, on the big stage.
Correct. And the footy finals, the AFL could not have asked for a better first week of finals. And Alex and I have been monitoring this a little bit in the background. There's a deal being brokered at the moment between the AFL, Foxtel and Channel 7, amongst others, but Foxtel and Channel 7 being the main parties competing for it, and they couldn't have asked for a better weekend, the AFL, to try and close out a deal, don't you think?
Mate, I watched the two of the AFL finals with a bunch of NRL supporters who obviously are not fans of AFL, and after the game, Geelong versus Collingwood were absolutely loving it. So screaming at the TV. So I agree. Very good time. You reckon they're flashing the ratings around in their negotiations at the moment?
Well, I dare say they would be, because at the start of the year, and in fact throughout most of this year, there's been talk that the viewership numbers are down in the AFL from where they were in 2020. They sort of, in 2019, they were dropping. 2020 spiked because everyone was locked down. But then since then, last year and then this year again, the ratings have fallen off. But over the weekend, they had a bit of a rebound, didn't they?
Yeah. So, mate, they had 786,000 people tune into Thursday night's game, which was Brisbane and Richmond. And that was the highest of the round. Had another 747,000 tune in for Geelong and Collingwood. And then it dropped a little bit for the others. But, yeah, very good ratings to say the least.
So up about 20% from the same weekend last year, which is reversing or bucking the trend. So a good weekend for them.
Mate, very good.
Not a great weekend for one guy. How would you be if you bought a $24 million house and within a year the thing burns down?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
You would be absolutely tipping unless you had something to do with it. So I'll be checking the insurance papers, I would have thought.
For those not listening, or even for those who do listen, who feel like they're having a bit of a rough week, and I've heard from a few listeners lately saying they're having a bit of a rough time. Look, you know, it is unfortunate, but this will put everything in perspective for you. Owen Chen is a fellow who has bought a house in Sydney, waterfront home on 4,000 square metres for $24 million. 50 firefighters were called out to his house over the weekend because the whole thing burnt down. It is a complete write-off.
Mate, it's all gone. Although we must say, though, having looked into his portfolio, we're not feeling overly sorry for him because just next door in Longview also has another two properties, one worth $7.5 million, one worth $8 million. So our man, who's the CEO of a Chinese lender, Aon, or Aon, I think you say, he's not short of $1.
Not short of $1. I hope he paid his insurance premium, though, because that house was 107 years old.
I hope he didn't have to have a wait period.
All right, so Mitch, you pulled me up, said I missed something on the intro there. I'm trying to get home for House of Dragon that's come out tonight. So come on, mate. What do you got for me?
No, it was on the topic of ratings, and you mentioned the AFL have had a very good weekend. So it got me thinking, outside of news, sport, and we're only talking free-to-air programs here, so the free-to-air networks, what do you think the top 3 highest rating shows on Sunday night were that just went. So last night, top 3 highest rating free-to-air shows.
Oh, Farmer Wants Wife.
In there, not the top though.
Okay.
Number 2, which had 576,000 viewers.
I'm going to say the Channel 7 equivalent. Whatever's on it at that time slot. What is it? Married at First Sight these days?
No, Farmers Wants a Wife is Channel 7.
Oh,
but
jobs.
Yeah. Number
Watch this. The block?
The block.
Okay,
Mate,
okay.
but to put this into context, right, so the AFL the AFL Thursday night final had 787,000. Mate, the block had 922,000 viewers last night. On a Sunday.
Versus Thursday.
Farmers Wants a Wife, 576,000, including myself. Not a bad show.
So did I, just quietly. How good looking is the main guy?
The one that I look like a little bit?
No, not the guy with the beard. No, I mean the other guy.
Yeah. Mate,
as if you look like that guy, mate.
Oh, my man with the blue eyes.
What?
But,
Farmer Will.
Yeah. My missus thinks I look more like the cattle. But
I was thinking when he's been called in, I thought, how does he not have a missus?
Oh, mate.
He must be a pig farmer.
Crazy.
That's what I was thinking.
Pig farmer. I reckon he's crazy. And then number 3, Spicks and Specks on the ABC. So there you go. I thought it would.
Golly.
Spicks and Specks, they reckon.
Hey, pulling it back in. We like the population numbers, and the next wave of population data is starting to come out. And Bernard Salt, big fan favourite of this show.
Yeah.
He's come out with an absolute corker on the weekend because, and the context is that he's talked about the fact Australia has grown by 2% in the last 5 years. If there was sort of growth across the whole population, then every age group would grow by 2%. But that's not what happens. In fact, no age group grows at the same rate. And in fact, the fastest growing cohort is the 70-plus-year-olds in Australia, growing at more than 30%.
And it's crazy because I think the 73-year age is growing at as high as 45%. That's
yeah,
high.
You're right. In fact, from 71 through to 74, all growing above 30%, whereas at the other end of the spectrum, from 40 to 44, we're actually shrinking. We shrunk by about 5 to 10%.
Interesting.
So I'm not sure what's happened to the 41 to 44-year-olds, because I guess you've got 3 things going on. You've got, number 1, births over deaths.
Yep.
So you'd like to think people in their early 40s shouldn't be dying.
Aren't dying.
Shouldn't be. Then you've got overseas migration, people coming in.
Yep.
Maybe there's a lot of 40-year-olds that get out of Australia or return home, potentially.
Yep.
Or you've got students. But I'm struggling to see how those numbers stack up no matter which trend.
Yeah, I agree. And presents a bit of a problem too, because you would think that the 70s, which is the one that's surging at the moment, probably not paying tax because they're not working.
No.
So
correct.
Whereas, the 21 to sort of 41 year brackets where the most common or the most employed people would sit, you'd want that to be your fastest growing as a government.
I mean, in fairness though, 35 to 40 grew by more than 20%. So whatever we've lost in the 40 to 44s, we've picked up in the 35s to 40. And I guess I want to ask a question, because your whole job, if you're doing it properly, is to find out where the population is growing, where the jobs are being created, where the infrastructure is being spent, to identify good places to invest. That's your job, right?
Yep.
So how do you then sort of look at these numbers? Is there a sort of, a specific age bracket, say, that you might put more emphasis on than others, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is that one that sits between 21 and 41. Most of the developing areas, which we consider to have high population growth, proximity to employment, infrastructure, and amenity, has a median age of around 28. So you're seeing that that's sort of where if we're tracking all of the things that leading us to growth areas, you'll find as a byproduct of that, your median age in those areas is generally those of, 28, young families, employed, access to employment.
Growing incomes.
All of that.
Okay, so following on from that, everywhere last week was this jobs summit. You couldn't escape it. It was on every news platform you could think of. The big news to come out of it, there was 36 takeaways. I could only really find one, and that was this. They're increasing our migration intake from 160,000 to 195,000. I might throw to you on this one because your whole job is to find places that are going to grow in population. Population growth is important because it drives demand for housing. But how does the Australian population grow?
Well, the Australian population grows in a couple of ways. The first one, obviously, is natural increase, births over deaths. Obviously, biologically, the population grows that way. The second is migration, people coming to Australia from other parts of the world. And leading up for the last 10 years, the Australian population has grown at about 375,000 per annum, which is made up of about 145,000 births net and about 230,000 overseas migrants net. So that's obviously including those leaving and coming. So that's sort of a breakdown of the population leading into it. And you're saying that they're going to increase from 160,000 cap on the migration component of that.
Correct.
And they're going to move it to 190,000.
Correct. And the argument for that is that in 2021, the Australian population only grew by about 135,000. So pretty much no migration. In fact, we slightly lost people, and we had a similar rate of births over deaths. Why that's a problem is because we've got this really low unemployment rate today. It's at a 50-year low. And the main reason for that is we haven't had people coming into the country, and we've got an ageing workforce. So they're now going to bump that number up to 195,000 from 160,000. The problem becomes, where are we going to get them all to live? Because we've got this big rental problem. I guess the government is, however, saying, well, look, we think that the lesser of two evils is to deal with the housing crisis and try and build more houses rather than have all these issues where, you can't get people to cover people if they're sick at airports and all those things that we're seeing, hard to get fruit and veg out of Woolies and Coles, all those sort of labour shortage issues that bite the average person.
You make a good point on where we're going to get them to live. And I think that the migrants or the, people that are planning to move here are thinking the exact same way, because I've seen that rents searches from overseas has almost doubled since about July 2021. So I think that, trying to get ahead of it, searching where to live, I thought that quite interesting that the amount of overseas people searching for rents had doubled in 12 months.
And we'll talk about the impact that's having when we get to the house price data later on. But the other thing that I did take away from the summit, not a real takeaway, but I love the quote. Basically, there's this lady called Danielle Wood. She is the CEO of the Grattan Institute. Now, I don't know that you're on, and I'll tell you why I don't think you're on great terms with her. But so the Grattan Institute is an independent think tank that are there to give opinion on what policy should be for the public. And they've got all this preamble on their website, but basically it just says, we'll say what we want when we want without fear of repercussion. And she said that the Australian economy, like all of us, bit harsh, looks increasingly older, fatter and slower. She goes on to say, I can't help but reflect that if untapped women's workforce participation was a massive iron ore deposit, we would have governments falling over themselves to give subsidies to get it out of the ground. So some great quotes that she's provided, but basically went on to say that our productivity has only increased 1.1% per annum for the last decade to 2020, and that was well down from nearly 2% increase. So we were getting 2% more productive every year, and then it dropped to 1%. So I don't know whether she's got a tab on your computer or what, because I wouldn't have thought a positive number would come out of your desk at all.
Mate, I'll tell you what, I was feeling personally attacked with older, fatter, slower. And then having heard you say that, I'm definitely personally attacked now, but I reckon if it's a positive figure, they've definitely missed our girl Alex's desk.
Must have got her on a non-leave day.
Yeah.
Now, Mitch, I found this interesting, but I'm going to say you've taken it to a whole new level. You've become a little bit obsessed with this piece of data here, and it is the fact that our politicians actually own a fair bit of property, don't they?
Mate, don't they what? So they look into... don't they what? I'm quite impressed, actually. So of our 151 MPs and 76 senators, They own 237 houses or apartments. And a lot of those are located in Canberra, obviously, because the majority of our senators and MPs would live in the nation's capital.
I don't know that they would. I think they'd live in the seat that they're in, and I reckon they might have a second house.
No, possibly. Well, there you go. There you go. It must be nice. So a couple of honourable mentions here. Our girl Karen Andrews, so she's the Shadow Home Affairs Minister. So she has her own home in Clear Island Waters and another 6 investment properties.
So Gold Coast. Okay, so Gold Coast.
You see her signs everywhere, just quietly.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
You've got the leader of the house, Tony Burke, Big Tones, as we like to call him here. He's got... I like to call him Big Tones. He's got his residence in Punchbowl and in ACT, and then another 4 investment properties. Wow. Labor MP Louise Miller-Frost, she's got her residence in Cumberland Park, as well as another 4 investment properties. So, yeah, very active, which is, tough because they're always complaining that the, politicians' salaries are low, but managing to use their dollars very efficiently.
Quite a few in the Labor Party too, which is interesting given that they were talking about introducing negative gearing bans not that long ago.
Yeah, I reckon there might have been a few personal objections coming out.
Yeah, correct. Hey, and lots of talk about house prices, so let's get our teeth stuck into them. The world's ending. House prices are just on the nose. Fastest rate of drop of in years. The data's out though. And as we always like to say, there is only truth in numbers. Talk us through what is going on market by market at the moment.
All right, so we'll focus on the capital city markets there. Sydney down 2.6% in August, making the year to date minus 7.3%, so dropped 7.3%.
It's been the biggest drop of all markets.
Biggest drop, and largely being driven by the upper quartile of the market, which is your big expensive houses, the $24 million ones burning down. Melbourne down 1.5% in August and down 5.1% year to date. Similar story to Sydney, being largely driven by that upper quartile. Brisbane, though, down 2.1% for August, still up 5.9% year to date. So still more expensive today than it was back at the start of the year. Adelaide down 0.2%, so it has been our best performing market year to date, up 11.4% calendar year to date. Perth down 0.2%, similar to Adelaide, or same as Adelaide, still up 4.3%. Canberra down 2%, up 0.7% year to date. And Australia on a national level down 1.8% and down 2.3% year to date. So still capital city markets that are positive year to date, but certainly month by month, all starting to ease. And so Sydney and Melbourne driving it.
This data comes from CoreLogic, and I thought it was really interesting. If you want to lay it deeper, Tim Lawless, who writes the release, spoke about the fact that the upper quartile is where a lot of the drop is coming, particularly in places like Sydney. So the upper quartile is the top 25% of sales by price. And he talked about the fact that a lot of those markets are down by 15% rather than the 7% across Sydney more broadly. The same trend in and the upper quartile is $4 million plus in Sydney. So you're going to have a fair bit of kanga to be buying there. Melbourne, fairly similar. They're sort of $2 million plus market, starting to see a bit of a drop. In Brisbane, the $1.5 million plus market, starting to feel it a little bit. The affordable area is actually continuing to grow, and he highlighted places like Logan, Gold Coast and Ipswich, where they've actually still kept increasing through the month of August. So sort of somewhat bucking the trend at the affordable end of the market. Having said all that, this was bound to happen. The property markets have gone up by 35% since the pandemic. They were going to correct a little bit. History suggests that we always get a correction of somewhere between 2 and 8%, and I think we're at about 2% now. So how long it keeps going, who knows, but I think we're just seeing a bit of a pause in the market just until we see that net overseas migration pick up again, and I think we go again. What is not slowing down, though, and what is of great concern, I'm sure, to politicians is rents. Rents just flying. There's no slowdown in sight. Brisbane's still up 14% for the year. 14%'s a lot.
It's a lot
to take in 1 year.
Yeah, agreed. Adelaide not far behind either at 12%. Sydney up 9.8% year on year. Melbourne 5.7%, Perth 8.7%, and Canberra 8.6%. So still, across all those markets, despite some of the, the house prices easing, the rents don't seem to be, which does present a bit of a problem for those looking for tenancy.
And I think too, my advice to anyone is always don't get too bogged down in the month to month. Take a long-term view. Biggest risk when it comes to investing, whether it's property or anything else, is cash flow. So if you can get good income coming in, rents being the way that you get income from your properties. If it's shares, it's dividends. There's different ways that you get cash flow. Make sure you've got cash flow so you can just tread water when the market isn't having its buoyant period of growth. Tread water and hold. All right, so Mitch, some really surprising real estate data came out last week. We're actually increasing how much we're spending, which seems like it bucks the trend of what you're reading in the newspapers, doesn't it?
Mate, absolutely. And to put some numbers behind that, in the month of July, we as Australians spent a record $34.7 billion at retail stores. So despite inflation, despite higher interest rates, we're certainly still opening up the wallet and purchasing. Retail sales climbed 1.3% last month. And according to the ABS, they were forecasting an increase of about 0.3%. So significantly outperformed what they were what they were forecasting for a increase in retail spending. And I think we're up 16.5% for the year in retail spending.
And a lot of it on clothes. 50% increase on how much we're spending on clothes. And I guess that makes sense because we can get out these days. We're going back to the offices. There's a need to dress to impress, per se. Having said that, though, it does surprise me because with inflation, with rates going up, I would have thought we'd be seeing the opposite. Just goes to show how much savings Aussies have built up over the past 12, 24 months. And also the fact that we can actually handle these increases to interest rates. I have to say, I saw the data Thursday, was surprised. Came home early Thursday afternoon, was not surprised because there was 4 boxes waiting at my door. and I don't know how to shop online. My wife is the culprit. There's 4 boxes of shoes sitting at my front door. And I said, Han, what's this? Who needs 4 pairs of shoes? And she said, well, no, they don't cost anything if I return them.
Mate.
And I'm thinking, is that the mindset we've got into?
I'm glad it's not just our household. I came downstairs the other day. I'd been at a wedding, so I wasn't coming into the office. Get downstairs on Friday morning, and my missus having coffee with the guy from Australian Post. Mate, they're on a first name basis. Comes in for a coffee. No, I'm only kidding, but they may as well be.
Well, look, it did actually cause me the irrits a little bit because I've phoned the bank 2 weeks ago now, got us a 0.5% rate increase, and I reckon Han's already spent it. Anyway, that is what we're seeing at the moment, though, and we'll go there next because I'm keeping an eye on some data that the Reserve Bank produces, and they every month look at how much is a existing customer of a bank paying as an interest rate versus the rates being offered to new customers. And not only is it not shrinking, it's been at 0.5% for the past 6 months. It's actually increasing. It's gone up to 0.6%. So the average new customer is getting a 0.6% rate discount on the existing customer. It doesn't sit right with me. What about you?
Nah, not at all. They should be looking after their existing clients just as much as trying to get new business, particularly because retention should be a big focus. 0.6% is quite a lot, though, like as a discrepancy.
Correct. Well, the Australian Financial Review honed in on it on the weekend and looked at how much the loans and deposits have been increasing for all the banks. And the big 4 are getting absolutely smashed by some of the smaller banks. Their loans and their deposits only growing by a couple of percent, whereas the likes of Macquarie and Suncorp absolutely flying, more than 15% growth. So Macquarie, Suncorp might be worth a bit of a call for those who do listen. They clearly are pinching a lot of business off the big banks who are probably not treating their existing customers like they should be. They do have probably 75% of all loans in Australia, the big four.
So off a lower base, and it certainly looks like banks are starting to look after savers a bit as well. And I guess that, fits into what you're saying. By chasing new business, if they're able to leverage against their savings pool, they can offer a cheaper rate because their funding costs are lower. And I saw Virgin Money, they are currently offering a 3.3% long-term saver account or just like a high-interest savings account. So 3.3%, it wasn't too long ago, but it wasn't too long ago we were struggling to find 1%.
Half.
Yeah, but there is conditions like you've got a limit of $250K. You've got to put in $2,000.
What, minimum $250? No, that's the max.
Limit. So, obviously $250K. You got to deposit $2K per month. You've got to do 5 transactions, and you get an extra 0.3% if you lock it in, which means that you have to give 32 days notice to withdraw. And that'll get you up to 3.6%. So anyway, little tidbit there for your troubles.
Oh, geez, that's a good note to finish on. Thank you, Mitch, for joining us. Surprisingly, one of your best efforts on this podcast. I think the last time I got you just off a wedding, mind you, I got you off a wedding this time. You've been to about 3 weddings in the past month, but you are surprisingly fresh, given your track record when it comes to attending weddings.
Mate, I can put that down to one thing and one thing only. I've been emceeing the weddings, and therefore I sit on mid-strength beers so as not to make a fool of myself. And my beautiful partner Katie pointed it out. She said, "You're so much more well-behaved when you're emceeing." So I think I'd put it down to that, James. But yeah, 3 and 8 days we've just completed.
3 and 8 days.
Yes.
Jeez. And do you go to weddings these days without being the MC? Or?
I occasionally turn up without being it, but end up, commandeering the microphone at some point.
Hey, thanks for joining, Mitch.
Pleasure to
keep
have.
an eye out for double shots later in the week, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Chat soon. Have a great week.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Double Shot with your favourite cousins, Alex and James Fitzgerald. If you've got a burning question or something we absolutely need to talk about on the pod, please write to us. Both of our emails are in the show notes. For little real estate tidbits and a little bit of banter, okay, a lot of banter, you can follow us on the gram. Our handle is thedoubleshot.podcast. That, my friends, is thedoubleshot.podcast. Until next time, think of us when you sit back and sip your next double shot.